So today we're putting the motor in the car. Alright guys, it has been a while since we've posted anything on here, mainly because I've been super busy trying to get the H22 together and ready to fire up. So this is where we are currently at. Today is the day when we turn the key, but you can look forward to this on an upcoming video. For now, check out the install.
So should we put the motor in the car?
Yeah, let's do it. We might need some help. All right, so for starters, we are going to get the engine off of the stand and on the ground so that we can install all of this beautiful clutch system. So I got an ACT Extreme, what's it called? Street Sprung Performance Extreme, all good words. So we've got the ACT Extreme pressure plate, and we got the Street Sprung disc. I opted for a sprung one because I still want this car to be streetable, but I still want the clutch to hold the power. Based on their specs, this should hold more than enough power for what I'm going for anyway. And then we're going to be using my old Fidanza flywheel. This is a lightweight Fidanza flywheel, and it's still in very good shape. I think it probably has less than 1,000 kilometers on it, so I'm comfortable running it as is. It's just going to need a bit of cleanup because it is slightly used. It's been attached to the engine for a long time, so we'll get some cleanup on that. And then once that's all installed, we got my transmission here. So this is just a stock 96 Prelude transmission. Actually no, this one's from the 94. Same thing though. And we got, what is it, Wave Track limited slip differential in there. I painted it black. We've got all the nice dress-up hardware. So we are gonna try really hard not to scratch anything today. We got a big heavy painted transmission, big heavy painted engine. Good luck.
We're gonna be very careful. Get some towels and blankets and put it all over there and just take our time.
Yeah, especially when we're using chains.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we definitely have some potential for scratching. I'm already mentally prepared for it, but I would like to minimize it as much as possible. So I guess let's just chain this thing up and start hoisting, right?
Get it off the stand and onto the floor so we can work on it.
So step one, we are gonna strip some of the extra stuff off of here. We're gonna lighten the load a little bit. Maybe help us with the whole balancing thing. So this
gives a little more space too to get the motor in there.
This is usually the point where you ask me what I'm doing, and then I answer.
Let's try that again. Okay, as you can see, we've got the transmission mated to the engine. We've got all of Matt's nice dress-up bolts here installed.
Very
and
convenient, right?
they're a little tough to work with, but hey, they look pretty. So now that we've got that, what are you working on here, Matt?
Well, we're giving these motor mounts a try, see how they line up. So far they're 100% better than my old eBay mounts.
Right on.
I've only put one on here, but this is, yeah, 100 times better.
Yeah, so here is the rear mount. This is the bracket that goes onto the engine itself. This guy just slots in there, something like that. And then just we'll test that side, and then we'll be able to see if all the mounts are gonna work.
All right guys, motor mounts for the most part are installed. So we got this one bolted up, the one back here bolted up. We're gonna hold off on this one because the transmission kind of has to slip underneath the frame rails, and we want as much clearance as possible back here. So we're gonna do this one once the engine is in, and then we can bolt that one up. We got the engine chained up here, so we're trying to set it up in such a way that I'm not going to scratch the crap out of my valve cover. So got some protective towels up here. I've spaced this chain out quite a ways, so it should stay pretty far away from the valve cover. And then as for this side, we didn't want to ruin any of the connectors by putting tension on them by the angle of the chain. So we have this strap that Tim is very proud of. So we're going to give this a try, and hopefully we don't drop it. Jacket!
Everyone's okay?
Blood pressure rose a little bit there.
Yeah, you got your heart rate monitor on, what's it say?
Sounds like a threat, Tim.
Whoa, Matt Wall. It's like you didn't just spend half of your life spray painting this thing.
Half your life.
And he just goes smacking it.
Oh,
Matt Wall. Come on, dude.
Alright guys, we are a few days later now, and got the fuel lines done. I've been working in the engine bay, getting a few little bits and pieces installed. So here's where we're at right now. So as you saw, fuel lines are done. I went ahead and got everything tight. So line going to the fuel filter, up to the rail, got the fuel pressure regulator figured out, got it right side up again, and then the line running back to the return. I also went ahead and got a 90-degree fitting, which has now allowed me to mount my pressure gauge properly, so very happy with that. Nothing's contacting anything anymore, so I think that cleaned it up quite a bit. I was a bit worried that it was going to come close to my bungs here for the catch can lines, but it's actually going to clear just fine, so that should all work out nicely. And coming around to this side, I've got alternator kind of figured out. Just put on a starter today, so that just came in. Figured I'd install it. Shifter cables are all hooked up, so we are shifting now. Also got underneath and installed some hose clamps on some of the coolant lines, which I should have done when the engine was still on the engine stand, but I guess I forgot about that. So luckily I did have it on my list so I wouldn't completely forget. So we got that done. Today I want to get my ATI super damper installed, or attempt to at least. So this is going to be the deciding factor on whether or not we have to pull this engine again. So it looks like we may have enough clearance here to get the damper installed, but I won't know until I start test fitting some things. Now I was waiting on a few things to come in before I could do this install. So this is my super damper, and I will not be running the pulley on the front, which means I had to order in some bolts to replace these ones that are too long. So I got some good quality bolts for that and washers. So I had talked to ATI about it to make sure that it was safe to run the damper without this pulley on here, because I'm not running power steering or AC, and they said yeah, that's just fine. As long as we replace these bolts with the proper length bolts and we torque them to spec, then this will all be balanced properly. So that's good. That's how I'm going to run it, and that'll also help with the install because then I don't have to worry with this being on the front of it taking up space either. So I also had to go ahead and order the install tool. So this is a very expensive tool, but it's basically a pulley installer and remover. So it doesn't have the 3 claws that would grip a pulley and yank it off. That's not recommended to use that. Only problem with this kit is it does not come with a stud adapter or the proper stud adapter for the H series crank, which is an M16 by 1.5, I believe. And the only adapter they had, they sold separately, looked like this. So this has the proper threading on it, but it is made for a Hellcat Charger, I believe. So this is way too big for my applications. So now I have to try and figure out a way to install it, because when I put all this together, it's way too long, and even when I tighten the installing tool all the way, it doesn't even come close to contacting the damper yet. It doesn't put any force on it, so I can't install it that way. So I figured I would need some kind of a spacer, so rather than finding some machined metal piece that would be the proper thing, I found a piece of tubing like this. It's basically just an exhaust adapter. I'm going to try this and see if it works. It's kind of redneck, but it was a $6 part, so I figured it was worth a try. If it bends or something like that, no big deal. I'll have to figure something else out though. So for this install, I actually want to make a separate video on it that goes into a bit more detail on how I do it, because I didn't really find a whole lot of information online about how to install this, so I figured it would be helpful to some people. I will briefly go over the install in this video, but I'd like to make a more detailed one just to help out anyone in the future. Alright, so everything is torqued down except the crank bolt, so I left a note for myself so I don't forget about it. I'm thinking what I'm going to end up doing is, once I have the axles in and I have the car lowered to the ground, I can put it in gear and then I should be able to torque this. If that doesn't work, then I'll need to have someone come and hold the flywheel for me. Anyway, so I put my torque marks on here. Since I used a black Sharpie on these bolts, I won't really be able to do the same thing I did here. So on these ones I just drew a line across from the bolt to the damper. That way I'll be able to very quickly see if the bolts are coming loose. So for the first little while when I have the car running, I will monitor that periodically. As for these ones, I just made sure that the line was pointing towards the center of the damper, and then that way if they're pointed away from the center, then I'll know that they've come loose as well. So something I'm going to monitor for the first little while, but they are all torqued to spec, so they should be good enough. Now next thing I'm going to do is install the belt.
You could not be more wrong.
Now I was planning on installing the belt as well today, but apparently I ended up ordering the wrong one. So I must have measured wrong, because what I did is I took the string and wrapped it around the damper and the alternator. I got 31 inches as a measurement, so that's what I ordered. Well, pretty close anyway, 31 1/4. But this is still quite a bit too small, so I guess I'm gonna have to order a new belt. So I'm still waiting on a few sensors and parts to come in for the back of the engine. So I don't want to do too much more work back here, or I'm going to start running out of space to install that stuff. So I think I'm going to hold off on that. I did have plans to get the intermediate shaft and possibly the axles installed, and I even have some coolant lines to run yet too. But I figured I would hold off on that until I have the sensors hooked up, and then I'd also like to get the wiring harness finalized, get everything kind of zip tied and cleaned up out of the way. So I'm going to hold off back there. I think next step I'm going to do is get my intercooler piping fitted up. So I did have it mocked up when I had the old engine in here with the old intake manifold, but now with these new engine mounts, the engine is definitely sitting a little bit different than it did before with the eBay mounts. And this intake also sits quite a bit lower because I don't have the butterfly valves in there anymore. So I want to test fit the intercooler piping now and see if it still works. If not, I'm going to have to do some trimming to make it fit up again. So I think I'm going to get the intercooler on here, get the piping run. So as you can see, this piping has been sitting on the shelf for quite a while. It's got a thick layer of dust on it. So I'm going to get this cleaned up and get it installed.